G'day, 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 you absolute bunch of bloody legends. A loser bum back on your screens with some high quality, single take, completely unedited, straight to YouTube retro technology video content. Glad to be back. This is a continuation from my previous video where, if you'll remember, I found a particular computer. Here he is. Hang on. There he is. What a beauty. Found this on the side of the road. Somebody had thrown it away. It's over 25 years old. Managed to get it back to life. See previous video, link in the description below. And today we're going to do a little bit of investigative hardware archaeology. It's experimental hardware archaeology, and look at the hardware size of this beast. Now, the reason I'm doing this stuff with it is ultimately I want to be able to stream to the internet video with playing actual DOS era games on the original hardware, unemulated. That's the objective. That's going to be the content, including DOS era local games, but we're also going to try to connect this beast to the internet and play some good old MUDs. Yes, because that's the audience which seems to have gotten this channel. So let's dive right in. Here he is. What a beauty, huh? Full-size tower, maxi tower, forehand, 60 centimeters tall, very, very beige, unbelievably beige. And yeah, I took a picture because it's easier to look at. This is the front, bit dirty, a bit grotty. It's got a turbo button and it's got a megahertz indicator, which is suspicious, but indicates that at least the housing is well over 25 years old. The turbo button went out of fashion about the time after the 486 and when the Pentium came. 386, 486, you had this button where you could like underclock your computer so your games wouldn't run too fast. It was usually 8 megahertz and then 33 megahertz or 66, whatever the native one. But it would go down to 8 so that your computer would think, oh, this is an old IBM PC, and you could play your games without them going at speed. Interestingly enough, even though it looks like a normal 8-segment display, it's not controlled directly. There's only 2 settings. So there's like one connector with 2 pins. If there's no power on there, it shows the number 8. And if there is power, it shows the number 33. That's it. Might reverse engineer that day. Then we have a CD-ROM. Some of you might still remember what these are like. And you'll notice that this one is less unbelievably beige than the rest. There was one in here, but it was broken. I had to replace it with this one. To get it working. And then we have these 2 mysterious slots. These are floppy drives, 5.25 inch at the bottom, 3.5 inch, 3.5 inch at the top. And what is a floppy drive? Well, basically, it's like your save icon. It's one of these. You would take one of these, insert it in the machine, and that's how you get storage. We might get back to that when we get to the software episode of this particular thing of this particular series. So yeah, we're doing this as hardware, and then there'll be another one where we dive into the operating system software, and then we'll start streaming some games. So if you look up here, there's a sticker. I'm not going to move the camera. I took a photo of it earlier. Archaeology. Let's look what we have here on the sticker. Wrong one. Oh my God. 240692. We have the proof here that this thing, at least the power supply and the housing, are over 30 years old, 3 decades. And if we then read what it says there, it's like this is from the manufacturer, the person who sold it. When it was originally sold, this was a 386 PC, which means it didn't have the maths coprocessor, with 4 megabytes of RAM. 4 megabytes. The entire RAM of this machine is too small to store a photo from a modern smartphone. It's got 1 floppy drive. It's got 1 floppy drive of 2 megabytes. I guess that might have been the 5.25 inch. It's got 1 hard drive of 44 megabytes. That's a bit suspicious. That might have been the streaming. And 120 megabyte. That was the hard disk that this thing was running on 30 years ago when it started. 120 megabyte. Think how small that is. You can't get anything these days which is that small. And 15 milliseconds was the seek time, which isn't bad. 2 serial, 1 parallel, VGA with 1 megabyte of RAM. So yeah, very simple VGA would have probably done 640 at best, maybe 1,000. Seng, I remember the brand Seng. It's got a tower housing and a keyboard, and it was sold without a monitor. Now, as you might remember from the previous video, where is it? Oh, I don't have it here. Do I have the screenshot? As you might remember from the previous video, what this thing was running is actually now a Pentium. So in experimental archaeology, somebody bought this in 92 and happily ran it for a while, but then put a Pentium MMX, right? The MMX, which stands for multimedia experience something. If you look on Wikipedia, it isn't even clear what MMX stands for, running at a blistering 200 megahertz. So you're going from a 386 to a Pentium 1, which you could consider a 586. You're going from 40 megahertz to 200 megahertz. And you're going from 4 megabytes RAM to 64 megabytes, which is a lot. Now, that 64 megabytes is a very interesting archaeology hint because you didn't need that to run any DOS applications or games or anything like that. So 64 megs meant that this thing was upgraded to run Windows. I suspect Windows 95 might have only been 3.1, maybe as far as 98. I don't know if I'm ever going to go down to try to get Windows installed on this machine, but I suspect it should run 95 okay and 98 at a pinch. I've run Windows 98 in my time on 8 megabytes of RAM. It was painful. So with 64, we have elbow room, maybe even up to 98. XP, probably not. Right? So yeah, let's go back to the video. That's what happened, right? So they had the housing, they kept the monitor, they kept the floppies, they kept the power supply, which is only 230 watts, which is nothing these days. That's like what you need to power a smartphone, right? But then they replaced the main board, and here's the main board. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit with the camera. Let's not. Oh god, it's so dirty. Sorry, I haven't cleaned the inside at the bottom. Apologies for the dirt there. That's what happens. It's the pixels that fall out the hard disk. They make the inside dirty. But what we have in here is a processor, and it's like this big. That's the processor, and the cooler is just this tiny little fan. None of this active cooling Peltier elements. It's still passive cooling. Up there we have the RAM. Then we have a graphics card, which is currently still the original, but I'm going to replace that because that one's a VGA. It does 1024 resolution, but it was just before the VESA standard was established. So out of my thing, I bought another one. I found another one. This is one with an S3 Verge chip, VIRGE, which is a reliable VESA chip. Why VESA? Because we're going to try to break the 80 character limit on the monitor for mudding in maybe 120 characters wide. Not sure if that's going to work actually. So that's why we'll replace the hard disk. We'll replace the graphics part. Hard disk. Speaking of hard, there was no hard disk in there. The guy who sold me this keyboard, because for 10 euros, I got this great mouse. See the other video, 3-button mouse with a ball in it. I got this old keyboard. I needed to because they have the different old round connectors. But he also gave me a hard disk, which didn't work, but I actually have some other ones. And he gave me also this thing, which we'll get to in a moment. All of that for 10 euros and some floppies, right? So for 10 euros, I got keyboard, mouse, hard disk, floppies, and this mysterious card, which we're going to get to soon. So when I was trying to get an operating system on there, I needed a hard disk, and I had some, but I just couldn't be bothered. And it would have been really annoying to get data over because this thing wasn't connected to the network. So and it doesn't have USB. So yeah, I can burn I can burn something onto a CD, boot from the CD, and then put the operating system on the hard disk. But if I want to get software on it, well, my current computers don't have floppy drives, right? I would have had to burn a CD every time, and I already had to reactivate another younger computer, which is only like 15 years old, just to burn the CD with the operating system to go in here to actually get this machine to work. So I got one of these. Hang on, I got it wrapped here in the thing. Very professional. These are kind of neat. There's a little thing there. So it takes the power connector, classic Molex large power connector. It connects to the IDE. So this is the old style hard disk connection, not super old style. Winchester is older. That had two cables. So before SATA, which we all have today, you had IDE. Most mainboards still have this. And then all you do is plug in this SD card. It's a large size SD card. And then this SD card pretends to be a hard disk of 2 gigabyte, which you saw the hard disk when we started in here was 120 megabytes, right? So 2 GB is absolutely monstrous for this thing. And that made it a lot easier because I've had to install the operating system on there. But to get the to software, the programs, the games, and whatever, I would just pop out the SD card, pop that in my modern computer, write the file to disk, pop it back in, and that's it. So cheating a little bit. Hey, we don't have to run everything on the original hardware. Where it's less noisy, it's a bit faster, especially on boot, and especially it's a lot easier to get the software back and forth. So that's why we did it this way. I have this highly professional protection so that as it dangles around inside, it doesn't short circuit on the main board. Some other loose cables in here. This one here was connected to the CD drive. CD drive works. I've just disconnected it because it accelerates the boot time. As I said, the VGA card gonna be replaced, and now we get to the next card. What's this mystery card which was bought with the together with the keyboard and the rest of the stuff? It's this beauty. It's an actual PCI Ethernet card. So it's a network card, which I've now inserted here. And I am so happy that I actually bought this from the guy. It was still shrink wrapped. Hang on, I can show you. It was shrink wrapped and still had like the old price tag on there. So this had been like reduced to 10 euros many years ago. And never got sold. The guy still, I guess he got it from the shop when it went bankrupt or something. And then he sold it to me and it was still shrink wrap, which was very good because it still had the CD inside, and the CD had the drivers to make this thing work with DOS. I scoured the internet, very hard to find these packet drivers for DOS. So in this case, lucky for me, I had the drivers, and spoiler alert, this thing has actually connected successfully to the internet and connected successfully to MUDs. We'll get more into that in the next video where I talk about the software. Right, that's the beast, right? You got storage, you got floppy, you got the thing, you got network, you got power, all good. Now I mentioned I wanted to stream, right? So here we get into further archaeology. Here, this is what we have. What's beige? Everything's beige in the day. Mysterious thing. Got a unlabeled switch on the front with a big, satisfying, click, what a click there, A and B. And then on the back, it's got all these holes. It's got 3 of them, 3 rows, so columns, one of them labeled input, output, one labeled B, and one labeled A. A is currently not completely plugged in, and I'm only using the video side. But it's got a video, and it's then got 2 of these round ones, which on the last video we saw, that's old school mouse and video connector, pre-USB. So this thing here is a so-called KVM switch, which I think stands for keyboard, video, and mouse. So the original use case was if I had 2 computers, but I didn't want to have 2 keyboards, 2 mice, and 2 monitors on my screen, I would plug this in. So I would plug my monitor, my single monitor and mouse and keyboard into here, and then I would take the other cables and plug those into computer B and computer A. And then simply with a flick of a switch, it's purely electrical, electromechanical. It takes all the wires from the one click and switches over to the other. It's hardware virtualization in hardware. So it was the clever way. If you had several computers, because you were so hardcore in the 90s, you had one of these. I actually, at my second real job, acquired one of these professionally, which had 4. You could connect 4 computers because our entire office IT consisted of like desktop machines like this thing sitting under a desk, and they actually had 4 keyboards and mouse stacked on top of each other's monitors. So like when I walked in, I bought one of these KVM switches, threw out 3 of the monitors and keyboards and mice. Well, I didn't throw them out, I took them home. And then we had a single one, and you could switch between them while the computers were still running, because it was the email server, the file server, and other stuff. And they were like, ooh, this man really knows computers. That's what launched my career. Now, I only have a computer. Why am I using this thing? It's a very unusual use case, and it actually works. We'll see when we get to it. I'm doing the reverse. So what I have is actually I have one computer connected to the in and out, and I have this thing. 1B is connected to this monitor on my table, and A is then going to go to the streaming hardware. Clever, huh? So that I can play locally directly on the monitor, but rather than have a video camera pointing at the monitor, which is going to be pretty ugly, and then you jiggle it and whatever. I'm actually going to take the VGA signal out of here and put it into the next bit. And here we are. When we're going to get to the next bit, there's a lot to the next bit. So next bit number one is like this very short cable, which goes in the back of the widget here, and B. So when A. So when I'm ready to stream, I'll switch it to A. It's coming from the machine. It's no longer going to this monitor. It's going to this VGA output, right? So we got the video signal coming out here. Then the video signal is going to go into this thing, which doesn't look very complicated. It's got a VGA on the one side and it's got an HDMI on the other. You'd think, oh, well, it's just one of those little adapter dongles you can get if you want to, use a HDMI on a VGA computer. But you'll notice it's got power and the blue LED, because this is not a straight converter. This is actually an upscaler. Those little widgets that don't take power, they basically just put the pins through, I guess, and they let HDMI do the thing. Well, that doesn't work in this case because of the signals that we're using. So this thing actually takes the VGA input, decodes it, right, and then upscales it to true VGA and makes a new HDMI signal rather than just wiring it through. It's generating a new HDMI signal, which is what we need to plug into this cable. And that cable takes then our video signal over here and it plugs it into this widget, which is an HDMI video capture. So that takes the HDMI signal, turns it into a USB thing, which I then plug into the laptop, and it just shows up basically as another webcam. And that's what we're streaming together with the audio, right? So we're going to be going computer to KVM switch to upscaler to video capture, cool, back to the laptop here, which I'm using to do my streaming, just so we can do streaming on of 30-year-old hardware rather than its emulation. Shmemulation. It's like CDs versus vinyl, right? Vinyl just has that warm analog feeling. Yeah, this is pretty close to analog. Last bits and pieces on the hardware back here. I don't know. You can't see it. There's a network switch, right? Because I have all these network cables, and this thing definitely is never going to get wireless. And I've got a Raspberry Pi, which, as we get to the software and to the streaming, has a reason to exist. And one day, this is the final bit of the hardware, because I've got all these plugs back here, because I need to have power for this thing, and I need to have to power the Raspberry Pi, which runs off 5 volts, and I need to have another power for the network switch, which is on 12 volts. I might actually, if the 230 watts is enough, grab the power from here. So I might even put the Pi and the switch inside the housing to have it all self-contained and grab the power from this power pack. To do what? Well, to bring you mud live on 30-year-old hardware running on DOS, 80 columns and things like that. We'll get more into that into the next video, which will be about the software. If you want to get that video, if you want to get the previous video, if you want to get all of my other fantastic content of the past 3 years, I would suggest that you share and subscribe, and tell your friends to share and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me a little bit on loserbum.com. Right there you have links to the channel, to the Twitter. I've got a Discord with nobody on there yet, bit of an Instagram. So those are the other channels which we'll be looking at. And with that, we have done with some really live, beautiful hardware archaeology back in the day, which I genuinely look forward to streaming video for you, because I have the excuse I'm not playing games, I'm creating video content. So look forward very much to that. Thanks very much. You're awesome. You're an absolute bunch of bloody legends. I'm Loserbum. You're the internet, and I am out of here.